Welcome to episode 77 of the Breaking Balls podcast, sponsored by Hendrick Motorsports, celebrating their 40th anniversary, if you didn't notice on the broadcast today. And add William Byron, your winner today, in a 1-2-3 sweep for Hendrick at Martinsville.
Bob, they give out a grandfather clock to the winner of this race. Hopefully it speeds up time, because if I had to watch any more of this racing at Martinsville this weekend, I was going to throw up. But we've got a lot to talk about. Just kidding.
Flags in the air. Boogity, boogity, boogity. Let's go racing, boys.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, this weekend at Martinsville was something. Am I right, Bob?
Something. Something. Yeah, we'll go with something. That's what we'll say, Ad. I always was told that if I don't have anything nice to say, don't say it at all. But that person also probably didn't have a podcast. So, Ad, this weekend was pretty shitty as far as NASCAR Martinsville terms. Trucks, Xfinity, Cup. There was not one saving grace the entire weekend out there.
No, I haven't seen this bad of a trilogy probably since The Godfather, and it wasn't just because today's race sucked. I mean, at least The Godfather 1 and 2 were good. There was just nothing good about this weekend for NASCAR. I mean, which is kind of a shame, because Martinsville's one of those tracks, there's so much history, you really circle it on the schedule, but it just didn't deliver.
I mean, this is now the fifth race now the next gen car, I believe, has been at Martinsville for. Outside of the Ross Chastain Wall, Hail Melon move in 2022, I mean, maybe we're 1 for 5 if you count that race as a good day. I mean, it's not like today was a shock if you really watched the last few Martinsville races. It's been a snoozer the last few years, but it felt like this year was just an icing on the cake with the broadcast, the way the race panned out. Just overall, obviously, William Byron's your winner today. Doesn't even dominate the race today. It didn't feel like William Byron was a factor if you watched 3/4 of the start of the race, and then William Byron just comes out of nowhere with one pit cycle and ends up winning the race. It just felt like whoever had the clean air at the end of the race was going to be your winner, right?
Yeah, this was the NASCAR Next Gen experience, right down to William Byron winning the race. Because as far as the past little bit NASCAR has gone, it seems like everybody rides around. There's one pit decision that makes, that really makes things interesting, or, shakes the race up, and William Byron ends up winning at the end of the race. It just seems like this is our stereotypical blueprint for NASCAR races right now. It's frustrating as all get out, but you can't really take anything away from the 2014, because ultimately, it's a team sport. We hate to see passes on pit road and stuff like that, but ultimately it is part of it. And, all credit goes to Rudy Fugle for making the call that eventually gave William Byron the track positioning he needed to get the win.
William Byron stayed around just enough. I think he was running P4 before that last pit cycle I think we had down 103 laps to go. And yeah, Rudy Fugle and that William Byron combination, since they've been paired together at Hendrick, has been absolutely lethal. I mean, you could say that they are probably the team to beat as far as the next gen era has been with that 24 car. They put it all together. It seems like when they are clicking on all cylinders, they are impossible to stop. And add one lap was the difference on this pit cycle. You saw Byron and them come in, and then you saw Larson and Chase Elliott come in, and then Denny Hamlin comes in 1 lap later. In a span of 2 laps, William Byron cycled out to the lead there. It just showed that not only was it an incredible time to make that call, but just how the smallest decisions really factored today, because it wasn't like you were going to have any passing on track today. Once you got through your green flag cycle, you were cemented for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, these cars, if they've shown us anything, it's that, they're so spec'd out that there's just not that much of a difference between anybody on the track. So, it's frustrating, but ultimately the only advantages that you can really find in the next gen era are on pit road. And, all credit to William Byron's team and Rudy Fugle for, saying, hey, we're going to come in, a little bit earlier than anyone would expect. And ultimately, like Al Pacino on any given Sunday, the inches we need are everywhere. And they found them. And it's hard to really, it just doesn't, it sucks, because at the end of the day, it's not on-track racing that is really the focal point of what we're watching. It's strategy and stuff like that. And don't get me wrong, there is room for that in the sport, but at the end of the day, the on-track product has to be what's prioritized. Am I right? Like, I'm not crazy, am I, Bob?
No, you're not. And I think that normally I would almost tend to lean that we're being negative, but you look at social media, and I hate to use Twitter and I guess now X as kind of the pulse of NASCAR, but you do get a feel, especially for the hardcore fans, kind of what's the trend on this race. Was it a great race? A lot of people are going to be in a good mood, and today I struggled to find even one positive thing about today's racing. And that's the issue, is if you like strategy, usually there's a race for you like that. There was no strategy today outside of one late pit cycle, but once it cycled out, and I love green flag pit cycles because it really does show, the full team aspect there. But one green flag cycle, like we said, it was 2 laps that really made the difference today out of a 500 lap Martinsville race.
It just seems
really didn't need to watch anything else.
No, I agree. And the craziest thing is that we all come in with such hope every week watching stage 1 because we think, okay, what tire did Goodyear bring? Did anybody nail the setup? What's going on? Like, is there anything that we're going to be able to notice in stage 1? And the only thing that stage 1 brought me today was frustration. I mean, I watched it and it was follow the leader. I mean, Kyle Larson was dominant, was what it was, but it just seemed like a lot of what I always say I will never be an F1 fan for, because it just felt like a lot of follow the leader. And it's just so frustrating, especially on, such a short track, and you're so used to kind of the golden age of NASCAR with guys getting moved and really struggling because of the horsepower in the car to keep the wheels on the track and, and to not keep the, to kind of keep the back end where it needs to be to get around the corner. And it just feels like there's none of that. And I understand, the next gen car is a necessary evil. I think it does ultimately, allow more teams to be competitive, but we can't act like this car is bulletproof anymore, especially at short tracks, and especially with the way that the schedule sets up that we're going to get Richmond and Martinsville back to back. It just, you either need to do something.
And Texas next week. Don't forget, buddy. We have a great thing for momentum with fans coming up here.
And that's the thing, is like, it almost makes me wonder, is there something we need to do with the early season schedule that can kind of, space some of this out? Because I feel like what's going to happen, like you're saying, we're headed to Texas next week, which has not been, another place where the next gen car has really struggled. And it feels like we're going to lose momentum as a sport, because this is the most relevant that NASCAR has been in a very long time. TV ratings have been great, but you can't produce 3 snooze fests in a row and expect new people to keep, kind of stick with your product. Ultimately, your loyal fans are going to be where they're going to be. And, we're going to watch every Sunday, but if you want to keep these new eyeballs locked in, you're going to need to give them something to watch. And these last 2 races, and I'm fearing Texas next week, certainly isn't it.
Yeah, well, I mean, Texas historically gives you a lot of hope for the future. That's going to go well. No, you nailed it on the head there. Or you hit the nail on the head there, Ad, where there's not a lot of hope, if you're a new fan going, oh, well, you got a great few races, and then the last few have just, really hit a cliff there almost. And I think when you look at Martinsville, like you said, it's an F1 Monaco style where it's one line, everyone runs a conveyor belt, you're not good enough to get up to the leader there. I mean, look at Kyle Larson. He dominated for the first part of a race and then, fell off. Look at Joe Logano, second stage, put 2 tires on and then led the entire stage. It wasn't like tires made a difference. There was no follow. It was just clean air. That's all that it really was if you got in front, you had the clean air and the advantage. And that's really been the whole thing with this next gen car, is the clean air. I think you look at Bristol a couple weeks ago and everyone goes, oh, we've saved short tracks now. We have done it. We have saved the city, Patrick. It's the SpongeBob meme there. We did it. We saved the city. And then you look at that and you think, okay, maybe that was just catching lightning in a bottle. I think more than anything with the tires there, because otherwise, short track package with the next gen car has been lackluster, putting it nicely. And this is just one other race, par for the course there. But yeah, like I said, I think that Bristol was probably an outlier, and it probably got people more excited about Martinsville this weekend. And the ones that were rewarded thinking, oh, it's going to be another old school Martinsville race, what you grew up on in the 2000s, the 2010s. I don't know what this next gen car needs to change, but you're killing the bread and butter of NASCAR. These short track bumping and banging tracks, Ad. This is really what NASCAR needs, and right now they're not delivering.
No, and that's the thing that is the most frustrating, is that this is these short tracks are the backbone of NASCAR. It's what really, makes the product different, is the fact that, you can move guys. And, there were still people, trying to move people around. I mean, you saw Chase Elliott, door William Byron on that last lap pretty good, but these cars are just so, so big and so, kind of beefy, for lack thereof a better word, that in order to really kind of move somebody, you got to slam into them. And that, that's not a line that I think a lot of drivers are really going to be willing to kind of ride, because the next thing you know, you hit a guy too hard, you hurt him, you hurt yourself. It's just, this next gen car has just created problems that we've never had as a sport. And that's what I think is the most frustrating, is that when you bring a new car, you shouldn't, it should enhance more of what you had and not just consistently create new problems. And I get it. They took a big swing here with this car, and it's hit in a lot of areas. It's, you can argue it's made the road course racing a little bit better. The 1.5 mile ovals, obviously, we're going to have to leave out Texas, but it just seems like there are areas where this improved. But to just basically, you've absolutely neutered short track racing. I mean, there is just no nuts left in it at all. And I think that's what really ultimately brought people to watching stuff like this. And you want to see the contact, you want to see guys get aggressive, you want to see these guys get frustrated with one another, but the car just doesn't allow for it, because ultimately, like you said, it's just whoever gets clean air, you're gonna have an advantage there. And then it's just a matter of whether or not you've got a good enough car to get through lap traffic. And it's just such a different product from what we're used to at the short tracks. And, you brought up the good point. How do we fix this? I don't know. I've never driven a race car, but everybody who has driven a race car has said, hey, we could use some more horsepower. And ultimately, maybe it's time to start listening. I understand that, you don't just want the drivers to be able to run the show and just, to be too reactive to what they're saying. But at this point, you've tried just about everything else. You've had Goodyear try and handle it. Let's give the guys some more horsepower and see what happens, at least. I mean, what do you have to lose at this point?
And the issue is you don't want to you don't want a cluster fest where it's just chaos every lap and a demolition derby. You don't want that. You don't want it to be the truck series or anything like that out there. But if you add horsepower, you're gonna see comers and goers at least. And you look at today, all those green flag runs, and I love green flag runs, because when you get green flag runs, you get green flag pit cycles, and it really, like I said, it introduces the whole team aspect. You have to be nails on that pit cycle, because it's all or nothing right there. If you have a mistake, it ruins your whole day. But like I said earlier, you can't have that entire stretch, that 2 or 3 lap stretch of pit road green flag cycles there, be the entire race at 500 laps. And right now with the next gen car, that's the issue, is there was nothing else. There's no comers and goers. There's no fall off with the tires there. So you're not seeing guys pass each other, at least on track. It's just follow the leader. It's carousel racing there. It was okay if you're a Hendrick Motorsports fan, I guess. I mean, it was the most green flag laps led since 96, or what is it? What was it at? Green flag laps at Martinsville cycle since 96.
Yeah, so, I think we ended up running more green flag races than we have since, I've been born, and here we are. I mean,
that works out for Hendrick. I mean, their pit crew has been really, really good this year. And again, with William Byron, you saw it today. They were the difference, of course, in the race. But it was a great day to be Hendrick at all, because you had the whole damn team at the track today. I mean, everyone was there except for Papa Rick, who ironically was the one person we were celebrating. But anyway, Fox definitely made sure you knew today was the 40th anniversary of the Bodine win, their first ever win in NASCAR. Kind of saved the team from going under. I'm sure if you're listening right now, you heard the story about a dozen times on Fox. And I've got some thoughts, but I'm just curious, fair or foul, did you think it was a little too much coverage on there by Fox? Was it just enough? It is a dynasty in motorsports. I mean, they probably have earned their keep, I guess, but what'd you think?
I'll say this before we get into any of it. The fact that, Hendrick as an organization thought enough of their employees to take 1,500 of them and bring them to the track and really make this a community event is really cool. But Bob, I think we're really glazing over the main point of this, which is, I'm not sure if you understood, but 40 years ago today, Hendrick Motorsports won their first race ever. I'm not. I don't. You know, man. I don't know. I don't know if you missed it. I don't know if you just don't care. You know, I don't know if they covered it enough. But the four horsemen in red today. You know, the Hendrick Strong, Papa Rick, recovering from knee surgery. Poor guy. You know, it's the toughest battle Rick Hendrick has ever had to face. But we're just, you know, Bob. This. If they would have said it one more time on the broadcast, I was going to throw up a little bit. It got to the point where it was like, look, is it a great story? Absolutely, 100%. You have to celebrate it, but you don't have to celebrate it ad nauseum. I mean, like I said, all credit to them for bringing everybody to the track and really making this an event. But Fox could have stopped carrying their water for them somewhere around stage 3, but they just never did.
They interviewed everyone from Timbuktu, the guy that was there for the Bodine win, to, you know, just the shop guy. And don't get me wrong, I love seeing that. Like you said, they need to be celebrated. It is a dynasty in NASCAR. It is, you can't tell the story of NASCAR without Hendrick Motorsports, obviously. They are synonymous with the sport. It's like the Petties. What the Hendrick family has done over there is incredible. And you have to make it part of the pregame or the pre-race broadcast. You have to mention it in the race. Obviously, you have to cover it. But it became almost the entire storyline of the race. And there's so much more going on. You know, I know there's not a ton of on-track action, but there's still things that you can cover on this race. There are, 36, 37 other drivers out there. If you want to count Collie, you can. So I guess 36, 37. But it just felt like every 20 or 30 laps, we either panned to somebody from the stands that was in the Hendrick booth, that little Hendrick worker area, or we went back to the Bodine story. And again, it's a great story like Kevin Harvick, because you can make a movie out of it. But at some point, it just felt like it was becoming an advertisement for Hendrick Motorsports. And listen, it's race Sunday. You only get 36 of these a year. Sponsors pay a lot of money for this. And Hendrick Motorsports got just absolutely slobbered over head to toe. And as a fan who loves to see the entire field covered, enough was enough. Just give me something else. Josh Berry's pit crew was awful today. They threw him in the back. Didn't hear about it. There was a wreck on the very last lap of the race in the overtime. We didn't see that entire replay. Not once. But don't worry. We interviewed every single Hendrick driver, and we called in Rick on this grainy phone service. But don't worry. The actual racing that I tuned into, I didn't get to hear about.
Dude, you're so right. It sounded like they called Rick Hendrick on like a sat phone from Afghanistan. It was bad. Like, if you're going to put him on the broadcast, can we at least make sure that he's got like a solid enough connection to where we can all hear it and have it be fine? But ultimately, Bob, I think you really are glazing over the main point of this, and it is that after it's been 14,600 days, Bob, since Hendrick Motorsports won at Martinsville. It was 40 years ago. Save the tree. Oh, I'm not sure if you understood it. I'm not sure if you saw it. I'm not sure if you covered it enough. But ultimately, 40 years, Bob. 40 years of Hendrick Motorsports. Did you know that? It's crazy. Absolutely crazy.
And they've dominated Martinsville. Don't get me wrong. They have absolutely dominated it over those 40 years. But again, there's just so much more in the Cup Series garage than Hendrick Motorsports. And I did love the paint schemes on a positive side. I loved all the ruby red. I think each one of them looked absolutely phenomenal for their schemes. Wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more, like team symmetry going forward, where they have a little bit more of that similar style there. But that's more just me being picky there. Again, I just came away from that broadcast, and part of it was the racing. Again, there's not a lot you can talk about. But it was just a perfect storm of the lackluster on-track stuff with the Hendrick coverage, I guess you can call it, on the broadcast, to where it was a perfect storm of, just as a fan who likes to see it all, really come away sour from this whole thing this weekend at Martinsville.
No, I agree with you. I think part of the reason that we are as frustrated as we are is because the on-track product was so bad that the broadcast booth really had nothing else to focus on. And ultimately, Hendrick did make a big deal out of this. The four similar paint schemes that I agree with you 100%. All four of them looked great for completely different reasons. They were, same colors, but all of them looked awesome. and then bringing the race shop basically to the track of all those employees and stuff. It was cool, but it shouldn't have been the only story that we covered all day.
Yeah, I mean, where was the coverage on Denny Hamlin's late pit selection there? I mean, I'm sitting there scratching my head because he's one of the only cars out there on the lead lap that pits in the overtime caution that comes out, where you thought, okay, maybe William Byron and Hendrick might bungle this. Denny Hamlin's in fourth, maybe he goes kamikaze on somebody. No, he pits and says, I'm going to go back to 10th, and then cycles out 11th as this race ends there. I would love to see more strategy breakdown on the broadcast. Larry Mack's got thoughts. I want to hear it. Instead, we get Clint Boyer yelling about, oh, Hendricks won again at Martinsville. There you go. That's a hot rod they got over there. What was Denny Hamlin doing over there? What was that decision there? Were you a fan of them risking it, or did you think they should have stayed out?
I mean, you got to read the room. I think that's the biggest thing there is that, if more people pitted in front of you, I don't hate the call, but literally no one else did. So, what realistically, what about the racing did Chris Gabehart look at and say, oh yeah, tires are really going to help me here? That's the part of it that I just don't understand, is that it's like like I said, read the room. You got to understand what's going to help you and what's not. I mean, you watch Joey Logano on 2 tires basically lead an entire stage. I mean, if that doesn't tell you how unimportant tires are, basically the rest of the guys in front of you not pitting for the overtime should have, and just didn't make a ton of sense to me.
And hindsight is 2020. Obviously, when they pitted, maybe the rest of the field goes with them behind them, and you cycle out there still fourth. But yeah, again, what is more likely? You overcoming the rest of the field in 2 laps at Martinsville of all places, especially at a day where you can't pass and Joey Logano led most of stage 2 on 2 fresh tires? Or are you going to stay out in 4th position, line up on the 2nd row, and maybe luck into something there with the leaders? What are you more likely to do? And in Denny Hamlin's position, he's not going for a good finish. He's going for wins right now. He's already locked into the playoffs, got a stage point today with the stage 2 win. So for him moving forward, it should have been all in right there and stay out. Get the track position. You're more likely to win with track position today. I didn't understand the move that the 11 team was doing today. I'm not Chris Gabehart. Obviously, Chris Gabehart's one of the best crew chiefs in the sport. Their win percentage is absolutely insane together with him and Denny Hamlin. But I just left that race kind of scratching my head going, that 11 team felt like they probably should have finished better than what they did.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird, especially seeing it from the 11 team, because they're usually so sound in everything that they do. Everything seems to have rhyme or reason, or you always have an idea of why they're doing what they're doing. But this was kind of the first move I've seen in a long time from that team that was a real head scratcher. I think, like I said, you just have to read the room. You have to understand what's going on in the flow of the race. And, ultimately, like you said, hindsight's 2020, but even as that move was being made, it just never really made sense to me at all.
There we go. I had to mute my mic. I didn't want America to hear me cough there at. It's always lovely there. But just to kind of go back into the race here, we do have to recap some of the on-track stuff here. We'll look at some of the results here. Obviously, Kyle Larson was your winner in stage 1. He gets a playoff point along with Denny Hamlin, who was your stage 2 winner, like we just said. Hendrick 1, 2, 3 is your finishing order there with Byron, Larson, and Elliott. Elliott and Bubba Wallace were there neck and neck toward the end there, but it was Hendrick 1, 2, 3 there. Obviously, they were the class of the field today, but it did feel like Bubba Wallace and Denny Hamlin really were kind of those guys that were always nipping at the heels of those 2 Hendrick cars. Whoever was out there 1, 2 felt like they always had a little bit of speed to kind of counteract with them today.
Yeah, I think, if you're Bubba Wallace, you definitely have to be coming away from this race happy, because it's the first time in a long time where we've seen Bubba carry momentum through an entire weekend. I think obviously from qualifying, just getting beat out by that 1/1000th of a second, usually when you see Bubba kind of qualify towards the front, we've kind of gotten used to him making a mistake early in the race and losing track position and then never seeing him again. And ultimately, I don't know if it was kind of the style of this race or what it was. He was just able to kind of keep himself at least in contention all day, which I think, the more laps you run that matter, the more that experience comes to help you down the line. And, like you said, if anybody not from the Hendrick Motorsports team, which was celebrating its 40th anniversary of their first win, I'm not sure if you knew that or not, but if there was anybody who looked like they were going to, have a good chance at it, it was Bubba Wallace all day. So, got to give credit to them. Definitely a step in the right direction.
And then you know how there's always that one guy in the group project that never does anything and gets the A. Well, that feels like that's Alex Bowman today. Obviously, it wasn't an awful day by any means, but with his teammates coming 1, 2, and 3, Alex Bowman finishing 8th does feel like he left a little on the table there. It just feels like he was a little bit off the pace compared to his teammates all day. Obviously, a good result for the 48 team, all things considered. They are just trying to point their way and get that confidence going after a year last year that left a lot to be desired there, Ad. Stuart Haas, we talked about it last week, Ad. Chase Briscoe, a top 10 finish there. But Ryan Preece, the guy we were kind of giving a little flack to last year, showing up, a 9th place finish there for him. Nice to see them kind of getting back on board. It feels like that Stuart Haas looked like they were one of the better Ford teams as a whole today. On a week where Ford was supposedly back. Not quite, but Stuart Haas, it looked like we're at least, a little bit more respectable again.
Yeah, I'm not sure if Ryan Preece listens to this podcast, but we're definitely going to take credit for lighting the fire under his ass a little bit. So yeah, we'll take that top 9 finish as the Breaking Balls podcast, and we'll move on to Texas and see what happens. I mean, no, but in all seriousness, just to see Chase Briscoe even perform as well as he did, even in qualifying. I mean, I was watching qualifying and I was drinking the Ford Kool-Aid. I thought to myself, you know what? Maybe it's time for me to go out there and find another Fusion and, get back on the squad here. I don't know. But ultimately, another disappointing result for Ford. Still waiting on that first win of the year, which just, you hate to see it. It's pretty late in the season for it, too. I mean, you got to figure it's going to come eventually. I think it turns into a bigger story if it doesn't, because that would be a pretty funny meetings to be sitting in with these race teams in the OEM. But yeah, I just think, all credit to Ryan Preece. We were talking about how, this kind of fits his background a little bit. And, no matter what we saw with on track, momentum is momentum. And just having the opportunity to, run around and get that top 10 finish, I think it really does offer them a chance to kind of get going in the right direction. So we'll see. I mean, in spite of Ford, Ryan Preece on his way back, baby.
Another guy that we do got to give some props to was running top 10 most of the day, even had a pit road penalty today where he had the wedge stuck in the car and was driving around for a second there. But Todd Gilliland out of Front Row Motorsports, the 38 team, another solid week for Todd Gilliland, a guy that really hasn't gotten a lot of publicity, kind of fought off losing his cup ride last year. Really outperformed Michael McDowell head and shoulders today, but that guy was running top 10 most of the day, finishing 13th there for that 38 team, Ad. A nice little shout out to him, because you like to see guys like that really take the next step. And it feels like this year, Todd Gilliland, especially that FRM team, but Todd Gilliland has really taken the step at being the guy that can get a solid result in the Cup Series now.
Yeah, I agree. I think, that was kind of the big shock of the race, was kind of looking up and consistently seeing Todd Gilliland in the top 10, especially because Michael McDowell just had an awful day today. But, Front Row, I've been banging the drum for Front Row since we started this podcast. I'm going to continue banging the drum for Front Row Motorsports, even if they are driving Fords. They just seem to consistently be building something. And, I don't know. It's just one of those things. I'm not in the race shop. I have no inside source. I have no idea what they're actually doing over there, but I'm going to believe in them blindly for absolutely no reason. And I'm just going to keep going with it.
You can believe all you want. Believe blindly, Ad. I'm here for that.
Bob, I'll say this. The one guy who was an absolute grinder all day was last year's champion, Ryan Blaney. I mean, the only guy who seemed to be moving up and down the field consistently. I mean, it just seemed like it was the perennial, kind of like the knight in the Monty Python movie was merely a flesh wound. I mean, everything that happened to him today to end up in the top 10. I mean, sometimes you just got to piece them together. So all credit to Ryan Blaney today.
If you looked at that race early, you thought, okay, Joe Logano is going to be the guy at Penske that's going to be the guy that pulls it together today. And it was a decent run from the 22 team as well, don't get me wrong, but Ryan Blaney really turned it on late, like you said, was just kind of there, fringe top 10, 15th today. And then that stage 3 really just kind of climbed his way through the field, ended up, scratching his way to a top 5 finish, your winner in the fall race last year, really showing that Ryan Blaney is a guy that is just going to put together finish after finish to really be a threat this year, I think, moving forward.
I'll ask you this, Bob. I got one question for you really quickly. And by this time last year, we had been talking about the one car, a lot. And it doesn't seem like this year Ross Chastain has that same kind of oomph. I mean, the only time we saw him today was when, William Byron was trying to get around him in that last lap or that, kind of the latter laps of stage 3. There's what I was going for. Is this something that Trackhouse needs to be concerned about? I mean, ultimately, you've got the sponsorship money and the personality showed enough last year to where, they've got a little bit of leeway, but it just seems like they're going to run out of racetrack a little bit if they don't start getting some results.
Yeah, I think that if you would have told the Trackhouse team that, 8 races in, Daniel Suarez would have a win, Ross Chastain wouldn't, they would have taken that, honestly, because you're more likely to get Ross Chastain in the playoffs now than having Daniel Suarez win a race. I think that's, fairly easy to say. Chastain hasn't shown great speed to start this year, obviously. I think it's too early to be too worried because he did finish 14th today. It's not a great finish by any means, but wasn't just awful to where he's going to throw the whole day away. But yeah, it's not the speed that we've expected that one team from. They've been contenders the last 2 years as championship-wise. You've got to see them take that step again this year. Right now you haven't, but at least their garage has seen somebody win because they're partnered with RCR. Those engines haven't looked super strong this year, but RCR is the one I'm actually kind of more worried about, I guess. That's been kind of the talk the last few weeks with everyone, but Kyle Busch 16th wasn't a factor today. And goodness gracious, Austin Dillon 34th, multiple laps off the pace today. RCR just another week where they are continuously behind the rest of the field there. And for being a tier 1 OEM team with Chevy, you expect a lot out of this 2-car charter team, but RCR is just another week, another struggle to the season. It's early, but are we pressing the panic button on the team yet?
I mean, I was getting ready to hit it on Kyle Busch, 2 weeks ago, I think it was. And, it certainly hasn't improved at all. I mean, there can't be a lot of hope in that camp right now because, especially, I just think at this point, is Austin Dillon wasting a seat? I don't know. That's an interesting thing to say about anybody, but it just feels like they're slowly but surely slipping away from being relevant. And like you said, as a tier 1 OEM partner, I mean, they don't have any reason not to. And that's the thing that it's like, I just can't really put my finger on what the issue is. I don't know if it's, a difference in like kind of a culture fit with obviously, Kyle Busch coming in from Joe Gibbs Racing. Does he do things that differently that he's rubbing people the wrong way? I mean, I don't know. It's at this point, it's all speculation, but I mean, you kind of got to really go deep into your bag to figure out what's going on because ultimately, like you said, with being a tier 1, OEM Chevy team, it just doesn't make sense as to why they're having this, these types of struggles this consistently early in the season.
Yeah, but you say that about Kyle Busch. This time last year, he had already had a win at California. RIP to Fontana.
That hurt.
You're a couple weeks away from him coming up on his second win of the season at Talladega, and you were thinking, okay, Kyle Busch is a championship threat. He's rejuvenized this RCR team. Him and Randall Burnett, who had great success with Tyler Reddick previously, they're going to be a force to be reckoned with. And you look at the second half of last year, now this year, they haven't had it. They, for whatever reason, it's not been there. And then you look at Austin Dillon, a 2023 season that was historically one of the worst in the Cup Series. I mean, especially in this current field, not a good year at all. And then this year, you thought, okay, maybe that's just a bad year. We'll chalk it up, come back this year. And it's been more of the same in the 3 teams. So I'm not really sure if it's just a struggle at RCR with the Cup Series right now, but you expect so much more out of those two right now. And I'm not sure what if there's just change needed. Obviously, they did switch out the crew chiefs with Austin Dillon this week. Didn't look like it mattered too much after their verbal spat last week. They had to switch them out. There's been pit crew switches. I really don't know what the next move over there at RCR is there. because it's not, there's not anything that can really change that's going to do much right now. They're on an island, it feels like.
No, I agree. I will say this, at this point of the podcast, it feels like it's been way too long since we've mentioned the fact that today is the anniversary of Hendrick Motorsports getting their 40th. It's their 40th anniversary of them getting their first win at Martinsville. And I think I should actually mention that Hendrick did lead 238 out of the 415 laps today at Martinsville. So now that we've handled that, where else do you want to go, Bob?
I can see Bodine crossing the finish line right now, Grandpa. It's lovely. Just to kind of wrap up on the results here, Ad. Again, another banner day for Harrison Burton. We'll give him his props. 33rd. He didn't even get shown, I don't think, once on TV there, so that was tough for the old Wood Brothers 21 there. But 33rd for Harrison Burton.
Hold on. You just missed him because he was on TV today. It was him getting lapped during stage 1 by Kyle Larson.
Stage 1 lapping, always a good sign to be getting lapped in stage 1 as an affiliate for the Penske team. Again, banner day for Colleague as well. Josh Williams in 27th there, and then Daniel Hemrick 28th. So, getting outperformed by Kaz Grall in the Rick Ware 20 and the Rick Ware 15. Absolutely lovely day for them. And then one guy we did mention a little bit ago, Josh Berry, 25th there. Had some great speed in practice and early on in the race with Stuart Haas in that 4-car, showing that he is a threat to have some good speed on these short tracks, but had an early pit road issue in stage 2 that dropped him out of the top 10, and then had a late penalty during the green flag cycles there, which caused him to just go a lap down even longer, and then just a lot more troubles for the Hendersonville, Tennessee native. But Josh, one day you will be in victory lane here, I promise, my friend.
I will say this much. That paint scheme deserved to be in victory lane. My
Elite.
God, was it pretty. Oh my goodness. Just to see that color of like that, almost like the gold, like the gold with a touch of bronze and the black decal. Oh, dude, that was beautiful.
It was great, and they almost wasted too much time on that at Stuart Haas, because then you saw Noah Gragson in his car, and then you saw Chase Briscoe's. Briscoe's is obviously his normal Hendrick scheme, but then you saw Gragson's, and you looked at both those and go, those guys think they're part of the Hendrick tribute, aren't they? That's nice of them running those cherry red schemes. Good for them at Stuart Haas. But no, absolutely beautiful scheme. That golden Mobile One scheme for Josh Berry there, Ad. Anything else that we missed from this Cup race here before we get into the little slander of trucks and Xfinity, whatever little speed bump we have to go over there?
Yeah, one more thing, and I don't think we've actually talked about it to this point, but it's important to remember that 40 years ago today, Hendrick Motorsports got their very first victory as a team. And that, I like I said, we haven't mentioned it at all. Nobody else has, but I just think it's really important. Before we move on, we should talk about it.
I'd rather talk about 40 years ago than today, so we might as well do that there. Because honestly, 40 years ago today, I guarantee you, whatever they were running, the Grand National Series, Xfinity Series, whatever they called it, that and the Truck Series race was probably not as bad as it was 40 years ago then. Because let me tell you, this weekend, we said it in the intro, good Lord, the Xfinity race was an absolute snoozer. The Truck Series was a cluster at the end. I don't even know if we want to delve time into it. What? Go ahead, please. I'll finish up. I'll clean up whatever we need to here. But this was a banner day for short track racing in the Cup Series and in NASCAR at all levels.
Yeah, it started Friday with trucks. The Truck Series was a shit show, 100%. Bona fide shit show. Nothing else to call it. But you expect it at this point. I think we've talked about it a little bit on the podcast, but this has not been a great year for the trucks.
It's been an awful year for the trucks. Good God, it's been bad.
I mean, and this was, this week's race really just kind of kept with that theme. I mean, if you weren't involved in a wreck in the Truck Series race, yes, you were. It felt like everybody, was running into each other. And, you almost hope, okay, you know what, Friday's Friday. It is what it is. Let's move on to Saturday. And the Xfinity cars. And usually there are saving grace on weekends like this. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not sure if it's come down, come from up the ladder that we needed to really make the Xfinity race bad, but boy, oh boy, did they ever do it. I mean, there was just nothing notable. It was kind of the same thing that we saw today. to where if you had clean air, you had success, and you had a chance to win the race. Otherwise, you just had nothing. And
well, hold on, Ad. There was not nothing. There was also a stack up in stage 2 in the entire right side of the field that wrecked out about half the field there, and half the top 10 there. So something did happen.
Anytime you get a Talladega Nights style wreck, like a movie, something you see in a movie where basically everybody except for 2 drivers are left, I mean, you're just having a bad day at the racetrack.
The broadcasters, was it Blaney and Hendrick? I think they just sounded so disappointed. They just sounded so disappointed with the drivers.
It's kind of funny though, because having the Cup guys call the Xfinity series and calling the Xfinity race, it's almost like having in a lot of instances these are these teams are affiliated and stuff like that, and just to hear, like you said, the disappointment in Austin Cindric of all people's voices of what was happening on the track, just there was something about that race, right down from the commentary, that just made it just so bad.
Eric Almirola, your winner there in that lovely He Gets a Scheme for Joe Gibbs Racing and Toyota there. He comes away with the win there. In the Truck Series, if you stayed up for it, congratulations there. But the Truck Series, your winner there was Christian Eckes. I watched the replay of the trucks at 1 a.m. Ad there. A little story there. It was about 12:45, 12:50 in the morning, right before F1 qualifying in Japan. I was watching the Truck Series replay because I was out on Friday night. Like a normal human, being social for once, getting out of the cave. And, I figured I'd watch the end of the Truck Series. So invest, the last 50 laps or so. And then it gets down to about 15 to go. And I'm looking at this broadcast going, it ends at 1, but surely they're going to go over. It's FS1. It's 1 in the morning. They're not going to cut it for, Blackstone replays or Blackstone Grill ads. I don't know. Midway through 15 to go in the lab, you get the thanks for watching today's broadcast. It's been a NASCAR televised event with all the cars on the screen, and it goes to commercial. I'm just sitting there going, are you kidding me? This is the most Truck Series. It is 1 in the morning on a Friday night. This is peak Truck Series. And oh no, it gets more peak, because then it comes back after the commercial break like nothing had happened, except you're about 4 laps into it. So you got about 12, 11 to go. And as you're trying to piece together what sort of parallel universe you're in, the caution comes out one more time for the Truck Series, just to give you that nice little cherry on top. And it was just like I was living in some kind of surreal fever dream. So I experienced absolute peak Earth 2 Craftsman Truck Series schizophrenia. But I've lived to see God, and I can tell you, somehow, Christian Eckes is your winner.
Here's what I'll say, Bob. Part of this is on you for not just knowing better to allow the FS1 broadcast to ruin your Friday night. Just go on YouTube and watch the highlights.
It wasn't up yet. They weren't up yet. I wanted to see the full thing. I wanted to get the full Jamie Little experience, and I'm so glad I did, because let me tell you, Ad, there was absolutely no beef on track this week. But in a nice little segue in the business here, there was plenty of beef off the track. Ironically, there was literally more beef off the track in NASCAR this week than there was at Martinsville on track this weekend. Because if you were under a rock, oh man, Denny Hamlin and Marcus Smith, the owner-president of Speedway Motorsports, who owns a lot of tracks in the NASCAR whole circuit there, got into some verbal spats on Twitter, and I'm sure you can look up the screenshots and all that, but this was happening around, midnight, 1 a.m.-ish, 11 o'clock, depending on where you're at time zone. And you're looking at this going, one of the faces of our sport, who's already been in controversy this week with this whole restart thing that I don't have the energy to get into on this podcast again, is going off against the track owner of half the tracks in NASCAR. What? What? Excuse me?
This is kind of like watching one of your parents get into a fight with your grandparents for the first time. You have no idea whose side to take. You have no idea how this even started. But clearly the animosity is there. And, that got deeply personal really quickly. I mean, it's one of those...
All over the paving of Sonoma, all because the pavement was coming up after a repave, which, don't get me wrong, driver safety concerns, we can throw some barbs at that, but boy, it got personal quick, like you said.
And the thing is that it's not like, if you understand, hi, Adam O'Shea, Californian here. We've had an abnormally rainy winter. A lot of water that probably they didn't anticipate when they were mixing that asphalt. And yeah, there's probably going to need to be some areas where that repave is going to need to be fixed. I have no idea how, chemistry works. I barely passed it, to say the least. But it just seems as if there's a reason, at least with Sonoma, I can understand why they're having trouble with, with the asphalt and with the pavement, because we've had so much rain. And, does Denny have a point? Yeah, absolutely. But I think all of his point kind of gets lost on the fact when he starts going after him like that personally. I mean, dude, it's a repave. And it's just, I don't know, man. It just sounds like, it was kind of like watching Denny drive a race car, 0 to 100 very, very quickly. I don't know. There's really no winner or loser here, as much as they both just looked like two dudes kind of tweeting back and forth at each other who, yeah, it can't be good for the sport, right? This can't be good.
I don't know what to think of it, man. I mean, you got two guys who are very influential in their own right, the driver's side, the owner's side, then you got the track side, the NASCAR side of things, going at it very publicly. Obviously, Denny even said afterwards, this is just, me getting frustrated. Obviously, the drivers and the teams are frustrated with NASCAR over the charter agreement and, everything that's going on. 2025 is a big year contract-wise. You got to get everything signed before then, or otherwise it's the Wild West in NASCAR. And I think a lot of that is frustration kind of bubbling over, but yeah, to make it so public, it's not a good look for anyone. Nobody comes out looking good at the end of this. It's just more everyone having some high school drama on Twitter. Sometimes it's good to log out, but then again, it's Denny Hamlin, and Denny Hamlin loves to be the center of attention here. We know that. I say that with the bumper behind me, but Denny Hamlin loves to be in the news there. So not a shock that Denny Hamlin is the one stepping up to people, especially Marcus Smith, two guys that are very opinionated in their own right, but very successful in the NASCAR scene. Curious to see what that looks like, if there's a public shaking of hands, an armistice, or if we kind of have this cold war between the owners and drivers and NASCAR still moving forward their ad. But once again, more beef off track than on track.
This felt like the NBA. I'm going to be dead honest with you, to where it's like all of a sudden you've got a star player going after an owner, and James Harden, Daryl Morey, we're talking to you. But it's just one of those things where it's like, you expect this in other sports. It's kind of the first time we've seen it in NASCAR, which is, I think, why it is such a head scratcher. But I mean, ultimately, I do appreciate, you're right. Denny probably could have sent a text message and, maybe had a call or, that type of thing. But ultimately, I guess I don't mind that it was public. I don't mind that being something you tweet, but then to kind of keep it going and to really just take, shots at each other publicly like that, I think at the end of the day, you guys are still going to have to work together. Denny's a team owner, and it's one of these things where it's like, was it the smartest thing to do for relationships moving forward? No, I don't think so. But ultimately, like Denny said, he's frustrated. That's what, Twitter X, whatever we call it nowadays, was kind of meant for, to get your raw reaction of, like the prompt says when you go to, type a tweet, what's on your mind? And Denny Hamlin clearly had some thoughts, and, he shared them. And, I got to give credit to Marcus Smith, because ultimately he held his own. I mean, to cut, it's so easy in the NASCAR circle to just throw the championship thing back at Denny, but the way he did it was creative enough for me to where, I'm going to tip my cap. Good job, Marcus.
Yeah. Of course, we're talking about Twitter beefs here, breaking balls. That's just so 2024. It hurts. I wish we were talking about more beefs on the track than this. But unfortunately, like I said, I've said it like multiple times now, but this was literally the most we had as far as action this week in NASCAR. We literally raced, for Christ's sake.
I was going to say, we literally raced at Martinsville this weekend, and Denny Hamlin took the hardest shot from Marcus Smith. Are you kidding me? Like, ugh.
I don't know how we got here, but again, it was a weird week in NASCAR. I don't think we've missed anything else. If we have, go ahead and let us know. We're on social media, Twitter Breaking Balls, Instagram Breaking Balls, our YouTube. We are back on Twitter, by the way. Elon finally let us back in after a few months of pleading, so we are back on there. Give us a follow. If you've made it this far, again, like, subscribe, share it, be a friend, tell a friend. The Breaking Balls army is small, but we are mighty, and we are growing in a grassroots movement, of course. We are getting bigger by the week, and we'll be back next week, of course, to talk about the grand race at Texas. Everyone looks forward to Texas when they put it on the NASCAR schedule. We always circle this one as a classic coming up.
What's so good about dumb old Texas? I mean, it's just one of those things that, you know, as a NASCAR fan, you kind of have to ask it, much like the great philosopher Patrick Starr did it in SpongeBob. I'm scared. I'm going to be honest with you. I am not hopeful. So
I'll say it wasn't horrible last year. It wasn't just god awful last year. So there is a little bit hope for Texas. Look, ovals in the next gen car are better than the short tracks. At this point, you almost look forward to Texas more than Martinsville, which is just an almost blasphemous statement. But I'm gonna put it out there. I feel like Martinsville is probably going to be more boring than Texas.
No, I agree with you. And I think that's the saddest thing that I could say in response to what you just said is, you know, I agree with your blasphemy at this point. It's at least a style of track where we've at least shown some interesting racing, you know, but as far as the short tracks go, I mean, Martinsville just makes me sad now because I know what it once was. I know what it could be, and it just isn't anymore. And it really it breaks my heart because it really does. That is a track that encapsulates everything that makes NASCAR different as a touring series. And to have this bad of a race and to have this bad of a feeling in my stomach after watching it's gross, man.
And after the momentum we've had to start the season, it's tough to have the last few weeks. But again, Texas is here to save us this week. We will be here again on Sunday night to recap all the action. We'll be putting up clips throughout the week and keeping our social medias updated. So give us a follow. Normally I give you the last word, but I'm going to make sure you know what the last word is tonight. What happened again this time? I don't know, 35, 40 years ago?
Well, here's the thing, Bob, and I think it's really important to remember because I don't think anybody really talked about it today, but all 4 Hendrick drivers had that ruby red paint scheme to celebrate and commemorate the fact that about 40 years ago today, Jeff Bodine crossed the finish line for Hendrick Motorsports, saving the company, really putting them on this winning trajectory. And, you know, at that point, I think it's maybe the most incredible thing that's ever happened, ever.
Hendrick Motorsports has risen. It has risen indeed.